So Eric Hoppenbrower, thank you again for the last 2 weeks. It's been a good ride so far.
Week 3.
We've we've had the experience of listening to Father Mike's homily. We've had the experience of discussing and praying through the Sunday readings, and then attending Mass and experiencing the liturgy of the Word and them being read to us. And we've gone into the Eucharist with that preparation. We've been sent out again with a stronger, continuous understanding week to week of the Scriptures. It's been a good ride so far.
A lot of talking about bread.
A lot of bread, a lot of John chapter 6, a lot of Ephesians thus far. I really want to share Father Mike Schmitz with as many people as possible. You know, sometimes some of us who are listening catch Father Mike. We watch the Sunday Mass from time to time, but other weeks we just miss out and we don't get to experience that point of wisdom he has to share from the reading. So it's a good way of kind of capping off our recap, looking back at last Sunday, seeing what we missed, what theme Father Mike went with that maybe we didn't. And then we'll have that knowing where we came from last Sunday before then going ahead to next Sunday's readings. So I'm excited.
Let's get into it.
We're going to actually be sitting in the 6th chapter of John's Gospel for a while. We were there last weekend. We're going to be there next weekend. Take a break and then following weekend. But we have Jesus, and what does he say? He says this thing that I never understood when I was growing up. He said this thing. He says, "You're looking for me not because you saw signs, but because you ate the loaves and were filled." And I always thought, like, isn't that the same thing? That you saw the signs of the multiplication of the loaves? But I didn't know what he meant. Basically, what he is saying is, in John's Gospel, he uses this term signs and wonders a bunch. And whenever Jesus does a miracle, John says that's a sign or it's a wonder. Because the signs are meant to point to something, right? That's what signs do. Signs point to something. The signs point to Jesus. So Jesus is saying, you're here, you're coming to me, not because you saw the signs, meaning not because you believe in me, but because you're thinking about yourself. Not because you want, not because you want me, but because you want something for you. You want something for yourself. You want something, basically, Jesus, the signs point to Jesus. He's the point of the signs. And all they just wanted more food. Last week we started this semi-series about consumer Catholic. And the idea is that a lot of us, when we come to the Lord, come to the church, we just take, right? We just want to get. We just want to receive. We just want to consume. And the call last weekend was, how do we become givers, right? How do we have that as our motto, that everything is given and nothing is wasted? But we want to do this not because it just will help like the local church if we're givers, or not just because it'll help the church around the world if we're givers, but because we need it. Because too often, most of us, we prefer the gifts over the giver of the gifts. And that's why we show up. That's why we come to the Lord, not because we want him, but because we want what he has to offer.
His miracles, signs, and wonders should point to an eternal reality, that he is the Messiah, the fulfillment of the prophecies. And to them, this sign points back to, what else can I get out of this? So it's like going with your friends, your rich friends, to like fast food or Denny's or whatever, because you know that they'll pick up the check if you're riding along. So,
sure. But that happens in all facets of life, including service to others. I know of a couple that had been serving veterans in our local community, and one of the things that they told me that really was hard on them personally was when they felt like veterans would come to them for support and then not be grateful. So I think that's a wonderful example from my life that applies to Father Mike's homily, where in essence you could give and give, but at the same time some people are just take, and nothing is never grateful, right? Mm-hmm. So sure. Obviously his homily is trying to remind us to be grateful for what we have, but also to be aware of the supremacy of the eternal gifts through Jesus Christ.
But when it comes to this, the giver and Jesus being assigned to God, and sometimes we look to the gift rather than the giver, it's kind of like when I was a kid, and Christmas gifts, where you're so excited, you unwrap the gift and you take like 1 minute to give your profuse thanks, like for the Xbox or PlayStation 2 or whatever it was back when I was a teenager, PlayStation 2. Right. And you're so excited to play it that from that point on, you're not considering the greater reality of purpose of life and balance in life, and you can totally lose sight of the giver. And so, parents want their kids to have a holistic health and approach to life that's fulfilling, and they want more for their kids. And the kids, when they look to the gift, let's say the gift of sexuality or the gift of food or anything where there's an inordinate or a disordered approach to it for the sake of pleasure and not for the original purpose, as in the way God designed it to be fulfilling for our nature and point to an eternal reality of communion with Him forever, man, it can be really tricky to keep our eyes on the giver and to stay in that state of gratitude and balance and perspective, because this world is so good. So that's the thing. God gave us such good things, but some of the greatest evils of this world are taking the best things that we've been given as a human race and disordering them for selfish purposes.
So it's a wonderful opportunity for us when we're fathers giving to our children unconditionally. We know that sometimes, especially when they're very young, they have no ability to be grateful because they just haven't had that chance yet, right? To grow in intellectual ability and understanding of the world.
Truth.
So it's a phase of life. I mean, and that's what's so great about becoming the vocation of marriage and parenthood, which is to say, to really recognize from both angles, the giving and the receiving.
They never knew freedom. Their grandparents never knew freedom. And here they are, having been set free by the Lord God, and they're in the wilderness, and what they're saying is, we want to go back. They're saying that we wish, at least if we were back enslaved in Egypt, at least then we would have our fill of food, and we'd have plenty of bread, we'd have plenty of meat. We'd be slaves, but we'd be able to consume what we wanted to consume. These people, they never knew freedom. They didn't know how to live in freedom, so they were victims. They were powerless. And so God is going to say, basically, okay, the next 40 years, I'm going to train you. The next 40 years are going to be 40 years of training, that you can find yourself in any circumstance, you can find yourself in any situation, and you can know that you can trust me. So what does he do? He gives the manna. Remember, he gives the manna. Why? Because God does want to feed us. God does want to give us these gifts. He loves you, and he wants to feed us. But then he says, here's the deal. Here's the rule. Only gather enough of this manna, only gather enough of this bread from heaven for that one day. You can gather twice as much on Fridays because you don't have to gather it on the Sabbath. But that's it. That is the rule. So here is God who says, I'm going to give you what you need, but also I'm going to give you some rules. And he says that in the Exodus, he says, thus I will test them.
And so the bread of life, which is Jesus, is eternal versus manna being perishable, much like any other material good that we have. And I think when we're talking about, or when Father Mike is talking about consumer Catholicism, think about it. In our consumer culture, everything is disposable. Everything is perishable, right?
Yeah.
Planned obsolescence. Those are things that are concepts in our...
Did you say obsolescence?
Yeah, planned obsolescence is a notion where manufacturers of goods, like let's just say a cell phone, doesn't last but a few years.
Apple making batteries.
Right, because you know why? They want to continue to sell things to you.
Right. Well,
the bread of life is eternal. I mean, it is. I mean, that's the beauty.
Yeah.
There's one, right? There's the new covenant, which is
no
Jesus
10x
Christ.
Eucharist.
No, we're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're not even looking for manna from heaven anymore, right?
That testing is training. Every day, you're going to be trained. Are you willing to obey me? Are you free to obey me? Are you able to trust me? It was training in obedience. It was training in trust. And above everything else, it's training in freedom. Because these people, they were slaves their entire lives. They have to learn how to be free. Now, our slavery, so often, how many of us are slaves to our emotions? I mean, how many of us are slaves to, I'm not going to do this thing. Why? Because I don't really feel like it. That can be us every single day of the week. As consumer Catholics, well, I'm not going to give. Why? Because I don't really feel like it. I'm not going to pray. Why? Because I don't really feel like it. I'm not going to trust in the Lord. Why? I don't really feel like trusting in the Lord right now. I remember we had a former student, his name's Dean, and Dean once talked about emotions. He was in prayer one day, and he said that the Lord kind of spoke to him about emotions, and he revealed this, and he shared it with me. He said, emotions do not reveal the truth about reality. Like, emotions don't reveal the truth about our situations, right? They don't reveal the truth about whether we should do this or shouldn't do that. These emotions do not reveal the truth about reality, but they do reveal the condition of our heart. I'll say that again because it's just so good. He said, emotions do not reveal the truth about reality, but they do reveal the truth, the condition of our heart. It reveals what I value. My emotions reveal what I long for. My emotions reveal what I desire. Our emotions reveal where we're slaves. You know, oftentimes our emotions reveal that sometimes 9 times out of 10, maybe even 10 times out of 10, I would rather have the gifts of God than I would have God. Like Jesus could look at us and say, you're here for more food, you're not here for me. So sometimes we think, well, we have to be more motivated. You just need to be more motivated to do the thing. You need to be more motivated to not be a consumer. Be more motivated to have that freedom. And we have to realize this is completely true. Motivation is overrated. Like, there's just motivation. The Olympics just started, I think like 2 Fridays ago, over a week ago, the Olympics started. And you can ask the question, how many of those Olympians wait until they feel like it to train? The answer is going to be absolutely 0. Absolutely none of them. None of them wait until they feel like it to start training. They've made a decision, and so they do it. They don't wait to feel like it. Why? Because they're free. This is a huge gift. Discipline equals freedom, says this former Navy SEAL. Have that discipline to be able to not be a slave to my emotions, not to be a slave to how I feel, because we realize action precedes attitude. They've actually done many studies on this. When someone doesn't feel like exercising, they don't feel like doing the hard task, if they start, then the more they do it, they feel like it. We have to. Every one of us has to break the slavery of being consumer Catholics. We have to enter into training and becoming free to choose. Becoming free to be able to decide ahead of time. Because the hard truth is this: if you and I, if we wait until we feel like it, if we wait until we feel motivated, our entire lives will pass us by while we wait. But you and I, we're being trained in freedom. The freedom to obey God's command. We're being trained in freedom, the freedom to trust His providence, to trust in His care. You and I are being trained in freedom. Trained in the freedom to love Him, to love the giver more than we love the gifts of the giver.
One of the things of Father Mike's homily was that feelings come from action, being faithful, being disciplined, having boundaries so that they could say yes in more meaningful ways. Like saying yes to giving up something out of love for a family member is such a deep, profound yes.
And we oftentimes in our political world, political conversations in America, talk about freedom in a way that's antithetical to what we're talking about right now, which is to say being free to do what we ought. And that's what I think Father Mike was trying to implore to all of us, to act first, do what is right first, and then the feelings will come.
Feelings follow, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a very intellectual approach to it. It's not based on passion. It's not based on what feels a certain way, but developing and forming our intellect to know what's the right thing to do and to actually relate to God. And so what I always told my youth group kids was, each and every day, you don't know what's going to happen, and you're going to make hundreds, if not thousands, of decisions. God should be the one helping us and directing us, since He knows every person we can encounter, every success that we could have, every laugh that we could enjoy, and everything, every moment that can go a certain way or not. And there's so many possibilities that it could be, and not starting with prayer or starting with this type of conversation, an angry start or a peaceful start, meditating, praying, reading scripture. So the importance of that. So anyway, I feel like that's a pretty good wrap up. Father Mike, thank you for your homilies. Thank you for how awesome you are. He's a really powerful mix of smart and very hardworking, because he does his Bible in a Year podcast. We'll have to shout that out and put a link in the description. It's one of the most downloaded, if not the number one. It's pretty high up there in iTunes, and he's been interviewed by quite a few different people who are up there in the YouTube media world to find out how he's been so successful with getting people interested in religion and faith again.
Sure.
Why are so many people tuning in?